Hey everyone, it's Allie, and I want to talk about the Mana Stacking Archmage Stormweaver build as we've learned quite a lot over day one. What I want to go over today is going to be the skill gems that I end up running, as we've learned quite a lot about what we should be running through Acts 1 and 2, as well as go over my passive tree and what I recommend for you to do in terms of pathing, and talk a little bit about my gear, how I put my gear together, and how I've been trying to go about finding upgrades and crafting my own items. The first thing that we should discuss is probably going to be the passive tree. Now, the passive tree is going to be pretty simplistic. I kind of followed what I talked about in the previous video before launch, but we did learn quite a few things that made it a little bit better. First off, we started by going over on the left side to pick up spell damage, going into the cast speed node, and we actually just completely dropped open mind and didn't bother picking it up because our mana regen just feels so good. I had zero mana problems, and even if I had a slight mana problem, pressing my mana flask even just once completely took it away. So instead, I just got the cast speed, picked up Path of Storms, and immediately went to exploit the elements, as this node gives you quite a lot of extra damage. From there, I ended up picking up Breath of Lightning, and then what our idea was is that we were then going to want to do this beeline up the middle to pick up Pure Power. We actually learned that if you attempt to do this in Act 2, you are going to have an absolutely miserable time because PoE 2 currently feels maybe a little bit overtuned. Maybe it's meant to be this hard, but Act 2 and end of Act 1 are pretty hard, and it pretty much seems like every single build in the game is pretty Z DPS through it, and everyone goes pretty slowly. And if in our build we just decided to pick up all these end nodes and no actual damage, especially given that we now know intelligence got nerfed and does not give you spell damage, which is unfortunate, you would kind of have a miserable time. So instead of doing this, what I'd recommend for you to do is to instead pick up Sudden Escalation with the crit chance node at the bottom, not the crit damage node. Pick up Critical Overload with the crit chance node on the left again, and then pick up Potent Incantation. And then from here, wait for 1 to 2 additional passive points on top of that, and then go over to the hooded one once you meet them, and then respec all of these crit nodes that you just picked up along with Potent Incantation, and then use those 11 passive points to beeline all the way to Pure Power, pick up Electric Amplification, and pick up Power Conduction. This is substantially better, and it will cost you somewhere around 4,000 to 5,000 gold to do this respec, so it's a little bit pricey, but honestly, it's really worth it as it's really painful to try and do this without it. From here, my plan is to probably go back and pick up Potent Incantation again, as it just seems like way too good of a node. And our only goal here is to really just stall and just pick up random passive points that give us damage until we get Archmage, which unfortunately we think is going to probably have to wait until about Act 5 or so, given that currently I'm in Act 3 and I only have 30 spirits and I've done every quest, meaning that one of the spirit quests in Act 2 is bugged. So we have to wait an extra act to get our 100 spirit for Archmage. And it looks like we're going to get quite a few more levels before we actually do get to that point. So like I said, picking up Potent Incantation is good. Maybe even coming over to the right and getting something like Alternating Current and Echoing Thunder, or maybe even coming up here and getting yourself Lightning Quick and Drench might be really good options. You'd also potentially choose to pick up some nodes such as Soul Bloom or Refocus, get yourself a little bit better energy shield recovery. One unfortunate thing here is that Refocus has been nerfed right before early access came out, and the insane defensive layer that provided you is just not going to be a thing anymore, which is a little bit unfortunate, but it's okay because Eldritch Battery is actually in the game and it actually works, and it is exactly as broken as we expect it to be, as we've had people test it. And the reason that it's actually in the game in comparison to what I've been telling people that it's not going to be in is because they actually just ended up reworking Discipline completely, as Discipline caused a infinite loop with Eldritch Battery, which is the reason Eldritch Battery was disabled to begin with. Instead of them keeping Eldritch Battery disabled, they decided to just rework Discipline to stop the interaction. So that means we now get Eldritch Battery, which I'm going to be making a whole video on, as this completely changes how we put together a build. It changes our defensive layers, and it literally just straight up makes our build substantially stronger than it was going to be. The TLDR here, as long as you do the small respec towards the end of Act 2 to make your life a little bit easier, and then just keep picking up lightning nodes, you should have a pretty easy time. I don't know exactly which lightning nodes you should pick, as I'm trying to make recommendations here based off what I think I'm probably going to pick in the next few levels. But if you want to know ahead of the video that's going to come out on YouTube about this tomorrow, I'd recommend for you to come by on Twitch and watch live and ask me any questions there and see exactly what I do, just so you're aware of everything and are informed a day ahead, or well, it comes on YouTube. I also want to very quickly go over my skills. So one thing that we learned is that we don't need Mana Remnants at all, and instead we should just pick up Grim Feast. Grim Feast is unbelievably good at keeping us alive because it gives us energy shield pretty much every single time you kill an enemy. And we learned that the overflow mechanic is really, really strong. When you overflow, you keep that overflow until you lose it through whatever is relevant to that resource. So for example, if I have 100 ES and I overflow it to 200 ES, I will only lose that ES whenever I actually take damage. That means it will not decay normally. It will not go down over time. You will literally just sit at double your energy shield until something actually hits you and makes you lose that energy shield, making this a very good buffer and a very good way of constantly recovering energy shield through Act 1 and Act 2. I honestly really liked it, and I had a pretty good time with it. In terms of skills, I did actually end up trying Arc, and Arc felt okay while leveling. They unfortunately nerfed it really badly to where it used to give 50% damage per chain, but now it gives 10%, which makes it kind of bad and kind of okay, I guess. Like, it's fine. It's just, it's kind of as good as Spark when it was looking to be better than Spark. So while trying it, I kind of realized to just tell people, hey, if you like Spark, just stick with Spark. So instead of that, what I end up beating the Act 2 boss with and what I'm going to go into Act 3 with is going to be Spark, Flame Wall, Orb of Storms, and Conductivity, which is basically the build that I mentioned to most likely level with anyways. On my Spark, I have a Pierce and an Arcane Tempo. Pierce is kind of just required to make Spark feel good for clearing. You really need it, otherwise it just feels like it's a very feels bad skill in very dense packs. While Arcane Tempo is great because it's effectively just 25% more damage, and we don't care that we're spending more mana casting it faster because we have no mana problems at all. Flame Wall is just there to augment your spark damage, where you want to put the flame wall down and then you just want to attack your sparks through it, and as you can see, they gain a little fire effect on them, meaning that they benefit from the added damage from Flame Wall, which is quite a lot of extra DPS. I linked a persistence to this to make the Flame Wall last 40% longer, so we can have more uptime on casting Spark in between each Flame Wall application. And then for Orb of Storms, what I end up doing is I end up running an Overabundance, which is increased limits. They unfortunately changed the names of a lot of supports, but it does the same thing where it just gives you an additional maximum Orb of Storms, so I can have two down at the same time. And I actually end up linking it with Unleash, which makes it so when I press an Orb of Storm, both of the Orb of Storms perfectly pixel stack on top of each other, meaning I don't need to double cast an Orb of Storm every time I want to put it down. I just press it once with Unleash, and then we get both of them down at the same time, and it's honestly really comfy. And then finally in Act 2, you get a tier 7 gem, and that's when we ended up getting Conductivity, which is a pretty large DPS increase, as it makes enemies have 33% less lightning resistance. I had a really good time with the setup. I at no point needed Arcane Surge, and I pretty much just immediately got these supports got more support gems, and immediately got my 2 supports for Spark, then my 2 supports for Orb of Storms, and then finally got Persistence last, as it really is more of just a quality of life than anything else. Finally, I want to go over my gear really quickly, as I've seen a lot of people ask me questions about it throughout the first day of streaming. They asked me a lot of questions of why I was using a staff and why I was using a wand and a foci through different points. And realistically, all I have to say here is I'm simply just trying to use the best weapons available to me at the time. We don't want to necessarily use a staff or a wand or a foci or whatever. It doesn't matter exactly what you use, as they all do the same thing. And we're simply just looking for good stats on that item. For example, on the staff, I have 70% damage as extra fire, which just means I do 17% more damage. I have 34% spell damage, which is great. I have a lot of mana, which doesn't really do anything right now, but it might be good for later. I have +2 level of all lightning skill gems, which is a massive DPS increase. We learned that additional gem levels is insane in Path of Exile 2 in comparison to Path of Exile 1, because all gem scaling is now exponential. The more gem levels you have, the straight up stronger your skill is by a pretty large margin. And finally, cast speed. Ideally, all you want to look for on your weapons, whether it's a staff or a wand and a foci, is simply just lightning damage or spell damage, additional spell gems to either all skill gems or lightning skill gems, cast speed, and any other useful mods such as mana or mana regeneration. There really isn't too much to it, and you can kind of wing it. And one thing you might be able to do is, if you have something you feel like is an upgrade, you can open up your gem tab and look at the DPS of your Spark or whatever is your main skill and see the DPS difference if you have a new weapon equipped in comparison to your old one. It might not be a perfect calculator of how much DPS something might be, as some of these stats might not necessarily work. For example, the damage extra fire might just not be counted here. I couldn't be able to tell you, so do take it with a little bit of grain of salt. But if the DPS skyrockets by a very large amount when you make an upgrade, then it probably is pretty good to keep. For the rest of my gear, it's really nothing special, but I just want to talk about it so people know what my thought process is when I'm looking for items and when I'm either crafting or finding upgrades on the floor. My helmet, for example, has just life and chaos res on ES base. It's great. I don't necessarily care that's an ES base, but it is nice to have a pretty big ES buffer given how good Grimfist feels. Well, my chest plate is the same thing, ES base with life and resistances. I don't really care that's an ES base. I mostly care that it had life and resistance on it to begin with. My amulet is literally the only amulet I've come across so far, and I got this in the first zone of the game. And then my 2 rings are completely useless with the exception that they have cold res and lightning res in the implicits, which are really important as we want to try and get to 75% fire, cold, and lightning res as soon as we can. My gloves are a horrible pair of gloves that only had life on them, which is great for me. I finally got an actual belt by the end of Act 2, which had a bunch of life on it. And then my boots had movement speed, and I happened to also have life on them, which is great. But the only important stat on my boots is literally if they just have movement speed or not. For a lot of these items, I kind of self-crafted them myself. For example, with my boots, they dropped as a blue pair of boots with 51 life and 5 chaos res. And then I ended up just vendoring a bunch of yellow items to the vendor. For example, if we talk to Zarka, we can either disenchant or sell. If we sell items, we get gold. But if we disenchant them, we can put in here any yellow or blue items. As you can see, this is disenchant for 1 regal shard. So if you disenchant 10 yellow items, you get a full regal orb, and I was able to use that regal orb to turn my life and chaos res boots into a pair of yellow boots. I got unbelievably lucky, and that regal orb also added 15 movement speed onto them. Outside of that, in a lot of cases, for example, like this helmet, I just took a decent white helmet base off of the ground and then just use a orb of transmutation on them. And if I end up rolling something good, in this case it rolled life, I would then also use an orb of augmentation for hopefully a second good stat, in this case chaos res, which is okay. And in case of this helmet, I might even want to save up a regal orb and use it on this helmet to see what the 3rd stat is, and then potentially even use some exalted orbs as I get them to make it even better. That's all that really is to making gear, is just maybe picking up a white item, checking what it has on it when you give it an orb of transmutation, or picking up blue items, seeing what the stats on them are, and then using an orb of augmentation to add more onto it if you like the stat that it has. As long as you keep those things in mind, it should be fairly easy to be able to upgrade your gear, and there really isn't too much that you have to worry about, as all the stats we're looking for are pretty straight to the point. I hope all this information will help you have an easier time through Act 1 and Act 2. I had a pretty easy time. I did die a few times here and there because the bosses are pretty damn brutal, and it's not really your fault. It's not really any build's fault. Pretty much everyone is just getting one shot by random bosses. If you've gone to Act 2 and fought the first boss, the hyena boss, I'm pretty sure you know exactly what I'm talking about, where that thing is just a little bit silly. With that said, I've been having a great time. Lots of people in Twitch chat have been saying they've been having a great time, and I can't wait to finally get Archmage tomorrow, put it together, and talk to you guys about some really massive upgrades that are coming for this build. As always, the best place to get all this info firsthand is going to be by coming over on Twitch and watching live as we put all this together. But as I've done with this video, all this information will also come to YouTube the next day after. I really appreciate all the support, cuties, and I hope you're all having fun with this build, and I hope to see you cuties tomorrow for some more fun. And with all that said, I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day, and I'll see you all next time.